On another edition of the Five Star Podcast of Wrestling, myself and Sean Benjamin will talk about the retirement of The Undertaker, as well as several dozen cases of COVID-19 in WWE. We'll also touch on Raw, SmackDown, and the Wednesday Night Wars on this edition of the Five Star Podcast of Wrestling. And welcome back to another week here in the saddle. I am your host, Sean Meyers, and Sean Benjamin joins us once again. Sean, thanks for taking the time with your fancy background behind you.
Yeah,
you were in the
little
Performance
SmackDown
Center,
love.
coming live from the PC. No, not quite, but
Right.
I feel like each week for like the past month now, I've had sort of a main topic regarding what's sort of happening in storylines and in the ring, and then a number of topics relating to what's happening in the wrestling industry and the world as a whole. And that's going to be the case again because COVID-19, sexual misconduct allegations, those have been rampant. It's led to some pretty substantial news stories. And quite frankly, I think even more to come over the next couple of days. There's going to be significant absences in weeks to come. We'll get to that. But I think I was pretty surprised when I got on Twitter about I think probably Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and I saw things saying The Undertaker is retired.
Yeah.
And I was like, how in the world was this announced at this time? This can't be real. This is clickbait. So apparently, and you can probably speak better to this than I can, everyone had been talking about this Last Ride series, so the kind of behind the scenes, and this has profiled The Undertaker's last 3+ years
Yep.
of his career, where he had camera crews following him, and it was, I believe, in 5 parts. Well, the 5th part concluded with him basically saying, I guess somewhat unofficial,
Yeah.
that he was stepping aside.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that these are unique circumstances, but it seems like a very bizarre way. That being said, there's never really a traditional textbook way to retire in professional wrestling. Some guys never really retire. So what was your take on how this played out, and will this be a legitimate retirement where we never see him wrestle again?
I think so. My gut tells me yes, just for the fact, and I was having a conversation with my wife earlier while watching SmackDown, that it was kind of the perfect way. Now, if it was, you watch the 5-part series, he talks about how he's not sure if he, in the beginning he was like, no, I'm not done. I got to have one more. I got to have one more. And then he keeps doing matches and he wants to keep going. But I think with the way the whole Corona and how they had to switch WrestleMania, I think that the way they were able to put that performance on with the Boneyard match, I think that's what sold him on, okay, that's how I want to go out.
Let me ask you this, because it's become very clear that they're saying, he had a 30-year career, but for people who have followed along, we know that 30 years began at Survivor Series in 1990.
Yep.
And to me, I don't know if he's into milestones or not, but it seems if you were to write this script, you would probably have him go out of Survivor Series on his 30-year anniversary.
Right.
I would say, and I'm just speculating, that I think that they would bring him back for a match if they knew they could do it in front of fans and give him a proper send-off that way. If it's still kind of a performance center or closed arena venues, maybe the decision is final that he will not wrestle again. But I would think that would be the send-off that they would want to give him. Now, maybe they could still bring him out of Survivor Series without having him wrestle.
Yeah.
But it does kind of seem like, to truly honor him, like they did with Ric Flair, like they did with Shawn Michaels, they would want to do it where he wrestles a match and he gets to send off that night and the subsequent night in front of a live audience.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely be a great way for the fans, for sure. I think maybe his send-off might have been that Boneyard match, but I think for the fans, it would be the perfect way to bring him out and, to do something. And, I mean, you never know. I mean, Corbin was calling him out tonight and saying he sucked and whatnot, so you never know if it could spark something, and it's usually how these things get going with him is somebody will name drop him, and then, he gets intrigued. Well, maybe I want to have a match with that guy, and you never know.
And I know this is really hard to answer because right now, again, we don't know who's even going to be available in the months to come. But if you were to say Undertaker's going to have one more match, who would you pick it to be against? Because there's a lot of speculation that, Undertaker and Sting was something that they had thought about. I can tell you firsthand, and it's become public knowledge, that Elias was supposed to wrestle The Undertaker, and they changed plans on that. There's some guys, I think when you see Edge come back and you think that was a feud that led to a WrestleMania main event, that was a pretty darn good one. There's a lot of guys I'm sure that would love to have that last match with him. As of now, it's AJ Styles. Is there some other match that you would want to see if he were to wrestle one more?
I would have loved to see the Sting one. That would be one for sure.
Do you think if they did that now in 2020 that it would be worth watching? Or would it be Undertaker Goldberg all over again?
I think it would probably be Undertaker Goldberg, and it's a shame, but after what happened with Sting against Seth Rollins when he got hurt, I think that was his wake up call that he was done. But I mean, that would have been a great match to see. But nowadays, I just don't know how many guys that Taker could get in the ring with. It's just a different era of wrestling, a different era. I mean, don't get me wrong, Randy and Edge put on a fantastic match last week in the greatest match ever. But, there's not too many guys that can do that and put it on for that long. And I just don't know who Taker would go with that would kind of match.
Right. So we'll work under the impression that is his final match. When you think of his career, where do you, I'm not saying necessarily number-wise, but where do you put him in terms of all-time greats, and what do you most remember about him? What will you most remember, I suppose?
I just remember him. I'll always remember him being just such a menacing character. I mean, you always knew, and it shows when you watch the behind the scenes that he was that guy in the background, that he was that father figure, that leader of the locker room. And that's what it felt like when he was there, and when he was on the show, he commanded respect. And I mean, that was the type of guy he is, and it's the kind of guy he showed. And I think the show showed that whenever he was on, that he demanded that type of respect, and it was aimed towards respecting him.
And you mentioned briefly Randy Orton and Edge and what they were calling possibly the greatest wrestling match ever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who think that the greatest WWE match of all time is The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. I personally wouldn't put it as number one, but it certainly seems to be like the clubhouse leader in terms of the greatest match in the company's history on the main roster. So I think that his spot is certainly solidified. I will say, though, I cannot put him up with Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I just never think he was the number one sustained guy in the company. But his, basically 15 really good years, 5 pretty solid years, and then 10 years basically as a part-timer. There's not many people who can match that in the company's history.
No. I mean, Hogan was around for a good bit, and he did that. Orton and Edge, I mean, they're really, I had to think when I was watching that match over again last night, it was on the network. And, I think back and I'm like, boy, Randy was out. I'm like, I was 20-some years old when Randy started.
Yeah, I think, 18 years in?
Yeah, and the same thing with Edge. I mean, I was like 98. Edge was in that match with Christian against the Hardy Boys, when they were the Brood back then. So it's just it's crazy the longevity that these guys had. But the Undertaker, I agree. There's a time and period for him where he was just dominant, and it was kind of that Survivor Series on, And then when Stone Cold and The Rock, he was that different character, but he still always commanded that respect.
So that was a big story throughout the week, and of course they honored him tonight on SmackDown. I'm sure that he will be in the Hall of Fame as soon as they have that again, things of that nature. But just as big of a story is what continues to happen in the world of professional wrestling, both with COVID-19 and, as I mentioned, sexual misconduct allegations, sexual assault allegations, sexual harassment, varying different things. WWE released 2 more guys today, I believe, and they were NXT UK guys. So we haven't really seen a big name in the company yet. Speculation is that could change at some point. Sammy Guevara from All Elite Wrestling has been suspended, and it actually goes back to just some crude comments he made about Sasha Banks, and this was even before he was with the company. And I do think it is tough when you go back retroactively and you find something that a person said, but it seems like that's the case with a lot of this stuff that happened years and years ago. Now it comes back to haunt these people when it comes to light. So there's definitely a lot of people that already were down on wrestling just for a number of reasons that have even more of a reason not to tune in right now. Is this going around not only in the major companies, but all across, it seems all throughout Europe, even here in the U.S. with independent wrestling? I know Impact released a number of guys, Michael Elgin, I believe Joey Ryan as well. It's and I don't know specifically, this wasn't necessarily with the sexual misconduct, but maybe some racial comments. Tessa Blanchard was like, it's, and she, I think, outside of WWE, might be the #1 women's wrestler in the world. So it seems as though
she was the men's champ in Impact. You know, I mean,
there's a lot going on where, you know, it seems like it's a black eye in the wrestling industry, and it might not be something that they can recover from real quick. What do you think the long-term ramifications are?
Yeah, I mean, it just brings a black eye, and it just you get those people that don't really care for the sport, you know, to say, oh, there goes wrestling again. It's just a black eye. It does. It hurts the name, and it's a shame because there's a lot of very good wrestlers out there. There's a lot of very good guys in wrestling, and it's a shame that these incidents are putting a black eye on the sport that these guys work very hard to do.
If you were Tony Khan or Vince McMahon, and I don't even know that Vince McMahon's really making decisions on signings. He's probably just confirming that, you know, he's okay with the money in the end. But should either of those companies down the road look at Tessa Blanchard, or is that something where they would rather just avoid the headache that comes with her history of, I guess, sort of bullying and making some racist comments?
Yeah, I mean, you never know in this business. I mean, there's so many guys. I mean, you look at the relationship that Vince had with Bischoff, for instance. You never thought those two would have ever worked together. They did. So it's hard to say. I mean, I think that, you know, and Khan's probably the same way. I think that each one will bring them in and have a meeting, have their people. They'll get a good feel, and then they'll go after that meeting. They'll have a meeting themselves, kind of see what they all think about it, and then kind of make a decision. But I mean, it's a never say never in the world of pro wrestling.
And so let's be honest, right now WWE is loving the Jeff Hardy redemption storyline.
Oh, absolutely.
Where he's been arrested, he's been disgraced. They're promoting that. So if you're going to give him a second, a third, and a fourth chance, where do you draw the line? Obviously, when it's very serious criminal allegations, those people probably don't get a second chance. But when it's, you know, something where you're being racially insensitive, does that person get a second chance? Does it matter if they're a great performer or if they're a borderline? Because I think we know, and I've made this analogy with Sean Saputo, if you're in the NFL and you're an okay player, you probably don't get that second chance. If you're an all-pro player, you probably do. Right.
And I think somebody in the case of Tessa Blanchard, I think she will. And I could definitely see AEW going after her right away. She would just add on to an already fantastic women's division in WWE, no matter what brand she goes to. So, you know, it'd be interesting, but, you know, I would like to see, you know, I believe in them getting, you know, these players getting another chance. So we'll see if it happens.
So that was the sexual and racial allegations. There's more bad news for the world of professional wrestling because with AEW and WWE in the crosshairs, they've continued to do these shows when all of the other major sports in North America have halted operations and have been basically 3 months plus on the sidelines. And these companies found a way to work through it. They basically said, we're not sports, we're entertainment.
Right.
And Vince and company assured us precautions were being taken. Well, it turns out they might have been doing some precautions, but they weren't actually testing people for months and months. Then they had someone who turned up to be positive, and I don't know if that was an independent test or what happened. Maybe they had symptoms. Now they did test people, and apparently the number hasn't come out. Certainly a lot of the names haven't come out, but it looks like several dozen people in the company in some capacity. And we know like 3 or 4, but they aren't in-ring competitors.
Right.
And it seems as though the strategy is they're going to continue to move forward with the show, even with some significant people not in there. And now it looks really smart of Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn not to do this all along. AEW kind of put it out there, and it's difficult because like you want to respect privacy, but you also sort of want to be transparent. Tony Khan said Jon Moxley's not going to be on the show tonight because he's been exposed to someone who has COVID-19, which, by the way, his wife Renee Young said that she has it, so I think we pretty much know who that is. So Moxley wasn't on AEW. He probably won't be maybe for a couple of weeks.
Right.
What's going to happen here? Like, this just seems like it's really gone from, trying to continue keeping, entertaining to looking like it really was just a hazardous situation for everyone in the entire company, both companies.
Yeah, it definitely it's taken a turn where you thought everybody was being safe and everything was being done the right way, and now these people are popping up, and it's scary for both brands. I mean, you look with Renee Young and Jon Moxley. You got Britt Baker and Adam Cole. Champ Adam Cole. You got you look at
Peyton
Perfect
Royce.
10. Yeah, Peyton Royce and Perfect 10. I mean, they're over there together. So there's so many people that are in both companies that it's kind of scary that what you thought was being taken care of really wasn't, and now it's coming to the forefront, and it's some dangerous times, especially with both camps being in Florida, and the numbers in Florida are really spiking now. And it's really hurting the business.
And they continue to run these shows in Florida, which now seems like the worst place. It seemed like the best place for a while because they had pretty loose restrictions. Well, now it's coming back to, and that's not to say that everything's been deadly. Most of these people probably are okay, but then I'll relate it to you. You're going to be back coaching football. You're going to be around a lot of young men if things go according to plan. If one of them has it, you go through a full team practice, it's probably likely other people are going to get it. And then when they take it home, that's when it becomes really scary. And I would think like, okay, the wrestlers probably will be okay, but will their families?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, it's a thought. I mean, it was definitely a thought for me getting back into it, and it has to be a thought for them as well. I mean, there are the guidelines. I know that we will be tested daily going in. They'll look for the fever, they'll do the test. And we thought that's what was happening in wrestling, but it's coming to find out that wasn't happening.
And it looks way, way worse for WWE now at this point.
Yeah, it does, because they were, you had Trump and Dana White and everybody talking to Vince McMahon, how are you guys doing and how are you doing it? But really, things were being loosely done. And now it's coming out.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot about things that, you have to address, but ultimately what we enjoy watching about wrestling is what happens on the television programming at the pay-per-views. And I think there was some pretty significant things that happened. And I want to start on Monday with, who would have thought Charlotte Flair tapping out in a free match on TV? And now it looks like she's going to be gone for a while. Probably not super long term, but she's sort of been written off. She taps out to Asuka. This was sort of shocking, although I will say I would have liked to have seen it mean more for Asuka, because
Yeah.
a month from now, I'm not sure people are even really going to remember this, because it just happened on a regular version of Monday Night Raw. What was your take when you saw that result?
Yeah, very shocked. I mean, she's had Asuka's number the whole time, and then all of a sudden Asuka gets her to tap, and I think with the way Charlotte was working on all three brands, I think that it's time she was ready for a vacation, because she made reference a couple times that she's the hardest working woman in WWE and blah blah blah. But yeah, it definitely was a shock to see her lose that way. But it was Asuka. It definitely would have been nicer to see it if she was on a pay-per-view, have some type of build-up for it. But I mean, to see Asuka get over the hump, I'd like to see Asuka become that menacing, that big-time champ that she was when she was in
that
NXT.
Match happened at SummerSlam and Charlotte Flair tapped out at SummerSlam.
Yeah,
that would register.
Yep, so much bigger, no doubt. And that's the thing, like trying to get Asuka those wins again.
So they also had a little bit of a feud leading up to that match, and Charlotte, because I think Vince McMahon will always protect her, she already went in with a shoulder injury, and that's because of Nia Jax. So after the match, after Charlotte taps out, she's backstage, Nia attacks her, closes her arm in, I don't know, some chest or something. So it looks like Charlotte's going to be off for a little bit, and I know they're hoping and praying it's not long term, because they've already lost so many stars, and we mentioned they're going to lose even more with positive tests. But it looks as though the way it was done, they're setting it up so that when Charlotte comes back, she'll be a face. Is that gonna work, or do you think, especially when fans do come back, if that happens, are they just going to continue to want to boo Charlotte?
I think there's always a half and half with Charlotte. There's always that part that do boo her, just because of how arrogant she comes across. But there's also a good bit that do, they give the woo, and everybody they cheer for her too. So I think it's 50-50 right now, and I think that they're just looking to get that other 50, to get her that babyface look.
So from one Flair to another, it's hard to believe that in 2020 Ric Flair is in a major storyline. And truthfully, I think they're going to pull the plug. With all these positive tests, I don't expect Ric Flair to continue to be there. No. Let's be honest, he almost died a few years ago.
Yep.
He's probably as big of a risk as anyone in the entire company. But he had been paired with Randy Orton, and at least on Monday he was. And so first he attacks Christian, Orton punts Christian. Now they want to continue with this Legend Killer theme. Who do they bring back? The Big Show. I like the Big Show, but this just seems like they're killing time with Randy Orton because they have something else in mind. And I think probably with Edge's injury, maybe they had to change plans a little bit.
Yeah.
Is this, like, when you look at Raw now with Bruce Pritchard, is this an example of them going a different direction, having Randy Orton and the Big Show, or is this kind of just like what I said, they kind of had to change plans?
I think the change of plans hurt with the injury, but it kind of reminds you when Bruce Pritchard had his hand in it years ago.
I just have a hard time picturing Heyman using the Big Show to feud with Randy Orton if he was still there.
Yeah, yep. It just kind of has that feel with the Pritchards back involved, and now that they're, you see Orton more of a focal point. You see now the Big Show coming back, and it's definitely, I think that really hurt with the injury to Edge. They didn't want that. I like how he came on and gave another speech and talked about what he did to Christian.
How good are his promos, by the way? Edge has been
incredible. Yeah, it's just, you can tell they've gotten so much better from years ago, because while he was off, he had that acting background. So now his promos are incredible, and it's just it makes you like, I can't wait for him to come back. Watching that promo last week, I wish he was ready to go next week. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But I think that hurt their timetable, and with the limited people that they have because of the COVID circumstance, it's hard for them to find a true competitor and a true legend for him to kill.
And I want to transition to Drew McIntyre momentarily, but let me sort of ask this. Probably looking at Orton Big Show, at Extreme Rules, which is, I think, for the most part, going to be kind of a thrown-together pay-per-view.
Yeah.
But what does Randy Orton do at SummerSlam? Does he challenge Drew McIntyre, or do they still keep those two apart? Because that's really the only thing I can see remaining for Randy Orton. He's going to beat the Big Show, right? I mean, that's a given. Yep. I don't see where else they go with Randy Orton unless Christian comes back and wrestles him at SummerSlam, which I've heard supposedly Christian still is not cleared.
Right. I heard that too. I don't think he is. I don't know that he ever will be. I heard his is significantly worse than what Edge's was, but I don't know. I haven't. I've been curious for the last year why Orton isn't in the title run or hasn't been in the title run. He hasn't had it for some time. You know, he's one of the top guys in the brand. You know,
and it seems like he's at his hottest now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like very hot. And, you know, you figure he really hasn't had the title since when? Since he had the Cena feuds. You know what I mean? And that's been some time now.
So we know that Randy Orton's going to be in something big at SummerSlam unless he tests positive. And you really can't take that for granted.
Right.
It seems as though him and the Big Show is just kind of biding their time. And I feel the exact same way about Drew McIntyre because maybe in another Bruce Pritchard move, his new number one contender wasn't even on Raw until Monday, that being Dolph Ziggler. And I'm a Ziggler fan, but man, does this seem thrown together. And I know they have a history, but like Ziggler didn't do a ton on SmackDown recently. He was sort of just secondary in the Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville feud. And now he comes to Raw and says, I want a title match, and that's signed for the pay-per-view. It seems, again, like maybe whatever they had in mind originally, they kind of wanted to get away from what Heyman had and come up with a new plan.
Yeah, it definitely, when that happened the other night, I was confused just where did that come from? I mean, yeah, because they have a little bit of a history, and that's good, you know, that they do, but it gives them a window to put that match into. But I was the same way. I was like, what has Dolph done to get that opportunity? He hasn't done anything. Yeah, he's been around a long time. He used to be running mates with McIntyre, but he hasn't done anything for a long time to be in that position.
It seems like whenever they need someone, it's Dolph Ziggler. They need someone to put over a new rookie, it's Dolph Ziggler. They need someone to kind of fill a spot for, you know, a title match for a month or whatever, it's Dolph Ziggler. And I think when they give him storylines, he's good. It's just no one ever believes he's going to win a title. Certainly not a world title, okay? Maybe they throw him a bone and give him an Intercontinental or U.S. title. He's not winning a world title because we just know they haven't booked him as someone special.
No, not at all. He's never been. I mean, he has that to his record, but I can't even honestly remember how he got it right this second. You know, but it's just hard to see him as champion.
I want to transition to Wednesday night because pretty big news in the ratings battle. NXT won substantially. Now, I know when you really break it down, you go by demographics and stuff like that. But looking at the numbers, NXT, which had lost, I would say, about 90% of the time head-to-head, won by a pretty wide margin. And it's so tough to, like, I can't really figure out when I look at the numbers what goes into that. Like, what leads to a spike one week? Why was NXT better this week, ratings-wise, than it was in previous weeks? The thing that stands out is it looks like Keith Lee has become a pretty big draw. He was in the main event with Finn Balor and Johnny Gargano, and ultimately, it just seems like, for whatever reason, this was a big week for NXT and a really down week for AEW. Did you watch both shows? What were your takeaways from Wednesday night? I
didn't catch AEW. I did hear that Moxley wasn't on, but I didn't catch it.
And I think Sammy was supposed to be in the main event, and he got pulled. Obviously, with what we talked about.
I'm just looking at the ratings right now, and you know, because I always go on to the Wednesday Night Wars, the Wikipedia that they have, and it gives a breakdown of every single week since the beginning, since it started. And
I
it
think
shows
this is maybe only the fourth time that NXT's won the head-to-head, something like that, since October.
Six times. It's 31-6-1.
Yes, the old tie.
Is the record. Yeah, the tie. Yep.
Do you see any correlation between the ratings and what's actually being promoted / done on the show? Because I remember back about a month ago, NXT had a stack show and they lost the ratings, but this one wasn't that. I mean, really, it was basically all about this main event. There wasn't anything else that was great. I mean, they had Aaliyah wrestling, they had Casey Catanzaro. Like, it wasn't a star-studded.
They had about 10 matches in, like, I was surprised at how many matches they had before that big one. You know what I mean?
Because Roderick Strong ran away again, which has been a fun storyline with him and Dexter Loomis.
Yep. But it definitely was.
You think, what did you promote? You promoted your main event with Keith Lee, Finn Balor, and Johnny Gargano.
Yep, and it brings some intrigue because you have Keith Lee, who's really coming on, and people love him, and I think he's phenomenal myself. And then you look at him against Gargano, against Finn Balor, two guys that could beat him and take the title. You know what I mean? So it was kind of curious who's going to get it, and then go against Cole for the winner take all. Them doing a winner take all match. That definitely has a lot of people intrigued.
And I'm guessing you saw this. They are now doing the Great American Bash on NXT. Now, this is kind of bizarre. I think AEW has sort of done like a themed show where they try to make it bigger than a regular episode. Yeah. I had heard actually that this might be like a 2-week thing for the Great American Bash. But what's the difference between this and every other episode? Is it just they're going to have beach balls in the background? I mean, do you think that will make much of a difference? Do you think anyone who wouldn't normally watch will tune in because of that theme?
I think the theme might have a lot to do with it. It's kind of crazy because I've heard for a long time that Cody wants that name because his dad created that. And
I think it ultimately comes down to it was a WCW trademark, and when Jinx bought the company, I would think it would be as simple as that, but I don't know the logistics. It seems like that should be pretty black and white, though. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's their trademark. They've always done it this time of the year. But I know it might be a little bit of a gut shot to Cody, too, just because he's wanted that name right for a long time. But I know Vince, one of the things whenever Vince purchased WCW back in the day, it wasn't for all the talent. It was for all the namesake and all the keepers and all the videos and everything. That's where all the money was. And that was before there was a WWE network, but I think they already saw the future with what they wanted to do.
Yep, they wanted to create that because having the name rights to all that stuff. I mean, you think about AEW has to come up. Yeah, they came up AEW title, the TNT television title. I mean, they have to create brand new titles because WWE owns every title there is.
I think it's interesting because you mentioned, it was a Dusty creation.
Yep.
It's so hard to kind of figure out, like, if Dusty was around still, if he hadn't passed away. He had, I think, he was obviously adored in WWE, in particular NXT, because he was down working. So, like, a lot of the guys who are now on the main roster, they work directly with Dusty in NXT. But I think that, like, WWE really respected him and treated him well. And I don't think most...
Oh, absolutely.
You really can't say anything negative about that. And I think that Cody and Brandy would, and obviously Goldust would say, like, they did treat him well. Now, did they screw Cody with stupid storylines? Yes. But I think that WWE actually treated the Rhodes pretty well the entire time. So I don't think that they can hate how they were treated. They can hate maybe the business model or, their political allegiances or how they treated other people.
Right.
But as far as how they treated, Dusty Rhodes, he had been honored. And I think that they always planned on doing as much as they could to honor Dusty, even before his sons went and started an opposing company.
Yeah, absolutely. They always have shown love to Dusty. They have the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. They do a lot with the Great American Bash.
Cody presented the first trophy. Cody and Brandy were there to present the first trophy to, I think it was Finn Balor and Samoa Joe maybe that won it the first time.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's nice to see,
You still there, Sean? You broke up on us.
They were so bitter at times towards WWE. What's that?
You're good. You were lagging a little bit. We got you back.
Oh, sorry. Yep. But yeah, it's kind of weird that why they had so much animosity a little bit, just because they were always treated really good. Goldust was in the storyline for a long time,
Right.
and and even when Cody was Stardust, I mean he was in the storyline for a long time, always on TV. Wasn't a main event, but it's good that Cody's getting that love now. But he when you look at him and you look at his brother against the talent in the WWE, it's hard to make them a main event talent. It really is. So, I mean, they honestly played where they were. Now they have a bigger say in their company, so they can make a push for it.
Anything else that you thought was particularly notable this week, whether it be what we saw tonight on SmackDown, what happened Wednesday or Monday, or just really anything relating to the wrestling industry?
I want to see Seth and Ray. I want to see that match get going.
And they had that as the main event to Monday Night Raw with Dominic, and then we had run-ins and Aleister Black, who, by the way, it's very obvious Aleister Black was a Paul Heyman. So like it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. And some of the guys that Heyman was high on, will Pritchard continue to use them? And Apollo Crews seems like one of those guys. But Aleister Black, no doubt, was a guy that Heyman loved. So will he still continue to be a big name? He was in the main event, but it was sort of as like a run-in.
Right.
So I think he'll probably be like a sidekick role, him and Humberto Carrillo along with Rey Mysterio.
Right. That was a good, that was good there. As far as SmackDown tonight, I'm still waiting for, it was so close the other night to seeing Sasha flipping on Bayley. She gave that whole lead up.
She's challenging Asuka, and I think, to me, that's a match that I would want to see at SummerSlam. I think that has the potential to be incredible. And if I were to say right now, I think Drew McIntyre's done a great job. But if you were to say who are the MVPs of this company over the last couple months, I would say Asuka, Sasha, and Bayley. Those three.
Yep. Definitely. No doubt. Sasha and Bayley, I mean, whenever, I know my little girl was watching the other night, and she's been waiting for them to turn. So as soon as Sasha gave the big lead up, like, I want a shot at the title, she's like, Daddy, 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 calling me in because, I mean, it's a big deal, and you're waiting for that turn. But, the match against Asuka, like you said, that's going to be phenomenal. They have a lot of NXT, the winner take all with Keith Lee and Adam Cole. I mean, they have a lot of good matches. They're building a lot of good guys down in NXT. And, as much as they are a top-level brand now, they still are building that talent, the other guys from there. You don't see any of that other talent in Raw or SmackDown. You know what I mean? So they still are kind of feeding that talent in to the main roster.
Right.
But, I still, NXT's just a phenomenal show. I enjoy it every week, and I enjoy all three.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. Again, if you want to follow us on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle. I was actually not live tweeting that much this week. I believe it or not, I went back to broadcasting baseball on Monday, so I was a little late on catching that. And then tonight I got to SmackDown about a half an hour in. So more times than not, I'm sitting around on every Monday, Wednesday, Friday with nothing else to do but tweet. So follow 5-Star Pod Wrestle, Instagram 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And again, we'll continue to do shows as long as there's wrestling and we have a more open schedule than was anticipated. But for now, we'll sign off for tonight. Once again, Sean Benjamin, Sean Meyers, we'll catch you again next week. It'll be right here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.